The last time I went fishing with my grandfather was in the early fall, just after my 21st birthday. He was 84, but still spry, stubborn, and sharp as ever. The kind of old-school man who drank black coffee and spoke like he'd been carved out of oak. He invited me to fish at a lake he'd been going to for decades. Said it was his place, a nameless, quiet body of water way out past the state line, hidden at the end of a dirt trail that barely qualified as a road. We drove out in his Jeep. After about 2 hours, he veered off the asphalt onto a rutted path that disappeared into thick forest. For another 2 miles, we bounced over roots and stones, branches clawing at the windows. Then we parked and carried the aluminum boat. No trailer, just muscle, through trees choked with underbrush. Even at his age, he wouldn't stop for a break. I was the one huffing behind him. When we reached the lake, it was almost surreal how quiet it was. No birds, no wind, just an eerie stillness that wrapped around the shoreline like fog. The water was perfectly still, as if the lake were holding its breath. We launched the boat and pushed out to the center. My grandfather didn't say much after we cast our lines. He just stared down into the water like it had something to say back. At first, I thought he was just focused, but as the minutes passed, I noticed his posture was rigid, his body leaning ever so slightly over the edge. I turned to ask if he was all right. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned even closer, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. His hand twitched. "Gramps," I said. He didn't flinch. I reached out and touched his shoulder. That's when it happened. There was a sudden splash, and his whole body jolted like he was trying to shove something back into the water. He snapped around, his face pale, mouth trembling. "Paddle," he barked. "Paddle now. No questions." I rowed like hell. We reached the shore in record time, practically abandoning the boat as he climbed out with a speed I hadn't seen in him in years. We didn't speak until we reached the Jeep and started speeding back down the trail. He didn't even look at me, just stared straight ahead. "What happened back there?" I finally demanded. He didn't answer for a while. When he did, his voice was hoarse. "I saw a face," he said. He kept his eyes on the road. It was in the water. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Reflection, maybe, but it came closer and closer until it was just beneath the surface. He paused. Then it grabbed me. He lifted his arm and showed me the red marks around his wrist. Deep indentations like fingers. Weeks later, he tried to describe it again. "It looked like a man," he said. "Almost. But the eyes, they weren't right. Big. Wrong shape. And the mouth, it didn't move. Just stared." He refused to go back to that lake. And neither have I. There was a pond a few miles outside of Pine Hollow, tucked behind a dying stretch of woods no one had cared about in years. Locals called it Devlin's Pond. No one really knew who Devlin was, or if he even existed, but the name stuck. It wasn't on any map. It wasn't maintained. But it was quiet, and it had fish. That's all I needed. I was 24 when I started going there regularly, tie my old blue kayak to a wooden post I'd hammered into the bank, paddling out to the middle where the fish bit best. That day started like any other, sunny, late afternoon, water like glass. Then I saw him. He emerged from the tree line. Thin, older, late 40s maybe, wearing faded jeans and a red flannel. He didn't wave back when I did, but he smiled. There was something off about it, off enough that my stomach stirred. He stepped into a dingy green rowboat that looked like it had been rotting in the mud for decades and began rowing toward me. When he got close, I tried to be polite. "Beautiful day, huh?" "Yes, absolutely," he said. Then nothing. He just sat there, oars in his lap, drifting closer. His boat thudded softly against mine, and we both bobbed with the small wave. He didn't move away. You fish much?" I asked, trying to ease the tension. "No, I don't fish," he said. A pause. I forced a chuckle. "Just relaxing then?" He didn't reply. He kept staring, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. I turned away, pretending to focus on my line, though I hadn't cast it in 10 minutes. I felt him still watching me. When I finally turned to meet his eyes, he broke contact after a few seconds and looked away. "Where are you from?" I asked, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. He jerked a thumb toward the hills. "Up there. You mean Silver Ridge?" "No, I'm not from there." His answers were dry, cold, and evasive. He contributed nothing. Just sat, stared, waited. I started inching my paddle toward the water, easing the kayak toward shore as casually as I could. He mirrored me. "Nice breeze today, huh?" I muttered, trying to mask my growing panic. He didn't answer. When I got close enough to land to make a run for it seemed natural, I said, "Well, I think I'm going to head out." "Slow day." That's when he lifted his flannel. A handgun was tucked into his waistband. "I can't let you leave," he said. I didn't think. I dove. The water slapped me like concrete, but adrenaline drove my arms as I kicked for shore. I didn't look back. Didn't check if he followed. Just tore through the woods, soaked and gasping, limbs clawed by branches, until I saw my porch light flickering through the trees. I burst into the house and locked every door and window. Pulled the shades. Sat on the floor, shaking, water pooling beneath me. I should have called the police. I didn't. Night fell fast. I left every light off, crouched by the dining room window, peeking through a half-inch gap in the curtain. Nothing. Then, just before midnight, I heard it. Footsteps in the yard. Leaves crunching. Then his voice. "Hey buddy, you up there? You trying to sleep? Didn't mean to wake you." His voice was soft. "Come." I almost screamed. I crawled through the kitchen, grabbed the landline, and whispered to 911. My bedroom was upstairs, but I stayed low, silent, hidden behind the couch as I waited. 20 minutes felt like hours. I kept expecting a crash, a window breaking, or a shadow to pass by the blinds. When the red and blue lights finally painted the ceiling, I broke down. The police searched everything. The woods, the yard, my kayak still tied to the post. Nothing. I moved a month later. Never saw him again. But sometimes when I hear footsteps on gravel, I remember the sound of his voice. And I wonder if Devlin's Pond ever had anything to do with fishing at all. Late August brought with it that restless kind of heat, the kind that pressed against your skin even after dark, thick and almost sour with the end of summer. It was our last week of freedom before school resumed, and our group, me, Jonah, Kira, and Trey, had convinced ourselves we needed one last memory to carry us through the monotony of the coming semester. That's how we ended up sneaking into the old Cedar Glen community pool at 1 in the morning. It sat right in the heart of a quiet residential street, nestled between dark houses with drawn curtains and sleeping dogs. The lot was empty, the building dark, the metal cage over the front gate locked tight. But we'd scoped it out. The eastern edge of the fence butted up against the backyard of a vacant property. So we slipped through the trees, hopped the privacy fence, and dropped down into the pool area like it was our personal after-hours water park. We stripped off our shirts and shoes and dove into the deep end, our laughter loud in the hot, wet dark. The pool had no lights. Without the sun, it was a vast black pit of water surrounded by shadow. Only the occasional gleam of moonlight on a ripple reminded you that this place was real. Jonah, Kira, and Trey drifted off toward the far side, splashing and joking. I hung back, floating alone and letting the silence sink in. For a moment, I actually felt calm, until I saw Kira climb out of the pool and jog barefoot across the concrete toward the water fountain. A few minutes later, I heard a splash from the far side of the pool. Someone else was back in the water, their head just visible, a dark shape gliding silently near the edge. Then came Kira's voice. "Hey, what did I miss?" I turned and saw her walking back across the deck, hair dripping from her trip to the fountain. I blinked. There were 3 of us on my side, and here came Kira, making 4. "So who was swimming across the pool?" Jonah whispered. "Who the hell is that?" The head glided closer, then vanished under the surface. No splash, no sound. We didn't move, just treaded water in silence, hearts thumping. The idea that it might be a security guard flashed through my head. But why would they have jumped into the pool? "What do we do?" Trey hissed. Before I could respond, something grabbed my ankle. It wasn't a tug. It was a clutch, tight and strong, pulling me downward. I thrashed and kicked, water splashing into my mouth as I screamed for help. The others froze. Then Jonah surged toward me, grabbing my arm and pulling hard. The grip didn't let go. Not at first. I felt nails digging into my skin, something cold and wet wrapped around my foot like a hand. My chest seized as I struggled for the surface. It wasn't until my other foot found the pool stairs that the grip suddenly released, and I broke through the water, gasping and choking. Jonah dragged me the rest of the way up. Kira and Trey were already over the fence, screaming for us to run. We didn't need to be told twice. We leapt the fence and sprinted barefoot across the dewy lawn, not stopping until we burst through the back door of Kira's house. Only then did we talk. "What the hell was that?" Kira kept repeating. "I thought maybe it was a joke," Trey said. "Like another kid, until he grabbed you." "It wasn't a guard," I said, clutching my leg. My ankle was red and scratched, like fingers that tried to crush it. Whoever it was, they wanted to pull me under. No one spoke after that. There were other possibilities, of course. A homeless man, a deranged neighbor, maybe even a prank that went too far. But deep down, we all knew better. There were only 4 of us, and one more head in the water. A 5th, and I swear I still remember its hair, slick and dark, floating on the surface like a shadow before it vanished. The sun was ruthless that day, baking the concrete, scorching the white siding of the house until the air shimmered. Our backyard pool sparkled like it was made of cut glass, beckoning us toward it. I was 8 years old enough to feel confident around the water, but young enough not to understand how fast it could turn cruel. My 6-year-old brother, Jamie, was somewhere inside the house getting ready. Or so I thought. I decided to jump in ahead of him. The cool water wrapped around me like silk, and I floated on my back, staring up at the blinding blue sky. The faint sound of the television inside, the rustle of my mother's cooking, and the occasional buzz of a wasp were the only sounds. Then I saw it. Something off. A shadow, motionless at the bottom of the deep end. I blinked and swam closer, hovering at the surface. It took me a few seconds to understand what I was looking at. It was Jamie, sitting still, legs crossed beneath him at the bottom of the pool. For one agonizing moment, my young mind refused to believe it. Maybe he was pretending, I thought. Maybe it was a trick, but he wasn't moving. Not a single twitch. His arms drifted lazily at his sides, and a small trail of bubbles trickled up from his mouth. I screamed. It wasn't a normal scream. It tore out of my throat raw and high-pitched like an alarm. I scrambled out of the pool, skin slick, water slapping against the concrete as I ran inside, shrieking. My parents burst through the back door. My dad didn't hesitate. He dove in head first, fully clothed, and swam down with desperate power. The water churned as he wrapped Jamie in his arms and surfaced, gasping for breath. My mother was crying before he even got Jamie out of the pool. They laid him on the patio. My dad knelt beside him, slamming his palms down on Jamie's chest, shouting his name, begging him to wake up. My mother dropped beside them, hands clasped in front of her face, whispering prayers between sobs. For a moment, the world froze. Then Jamie coughed, a ragged, choking sound that brought with it a torrent of pool water. His eyes fluttered open, confused and wide, and my mother grabbed him, sobbing into his hair. He survived. A miracle. After that day, the rules changed. My parents locked the pool gate. No more swimming unless both of them were watching. Not until we were 10, they said. I didn't argue, because sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see him down there, suspended in blue silence, eyes open, unmoving, like something waiting. I woke with that kind of jolt you get when you fall in a dream, heart racing, drenched in confusion. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed, 2:17 a.m. in ghostly red. And then I heard it, water slapping gently against tile, rhythmic like someone waiting in a pool. I live alone. My house is small and quiet, nestled at the edge of a sleepy subdivision. My backyard is walled in by high wooden fences, and at its center is the pool, still chlorinated, rarely used. There shouldn't have been anyone in it. I crept out of bed, bare feet brushing across the cool floorboards. My bedroom didn't face the yard, so I had to head downstairs. The den had a sliding glass door that looked directly out to the pool deck. The blinds were down, but the window was cracked open. Through it, I could still hear soft splashes, too rhythmic to be natural, too quiet to be playful. I lowered myself beside the blinds, heart pounding, and slowly lifted one slat to peek out. The water was still again. The silence was suffocating. My breath hitched. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe a raccoon had slipped in and out again. But I had to be sure. I slid the door open and stepped outside. The air smelled like damp concrete and chlorine. My eyes adjusted to the moonlight, silver and cold across the rippling surface. That's when I saw it. A figure submerged, motionless in the shallow end. Pale limbs floated just beneath the surface. Hair drifted like seaweed around a head bowed at an unnatural angle. My stomach lurched. I rushed to the water's edge and reached in, hands trembling, gripped by some terrible instinct. The body was ice cold. I hauled him out, dead weight, slippery limp. A man, maybe in his 30s. Shirtless. His lips were tinged blue, his skin bloated. He wasn't breathing. I stumbled backward, scanning the yard in panic. And then I saw movement just at the edge of the bushes along the fence. Someone stood there, motionless, watching. I couldn't make out a face, just a silhouette. But they didn't run when I looked at them. They didn't flinch. I bolted back inside, slammed the door, and called 911 with shaking fingers. The police arrived quickly, too quickly. I led them outside, my voice a stammering mess. But when we reached the pool, there was nothing. No body, no footprints in the mud, no figure in the bushes. Just the empty pool, still as glass, with ripples fading under the moonlight. They looked at me like I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. Maybe something about the night had twisted my memory. But I know what I saw, and every time I hear water at night now, Every gentle splash, I shut the blinds. I don't look. We were driving forever. Endless rows of pine trees blurred past the car windows, the last slivers of sunlight fading behind the hills. My family had set out to visit distant relatives across the state, but the drive proved too long for one day, so we stopped at a small roadside inn somewhere in the countryside. The place was buried in isolation, fields on one side, dense woods swallowing the other. Only a few cars sat in the gravel lot. There was a fruit stand across the road and a crooked wooden sign swinging in the breeze. The inn itself looked clean enough. Quaint. Forgettable. After unpacking, we didn't know what to do with ourselves. It was too late for a proper outing, but too early to sleep. Then my brother spotted the pool. It was behind the inn, shielded from view by a row of hedges. Surprisingly well-maintained, but utterly empty. There was no gate, no staff, no signs. The water looked dark and cold in the moonlight, but that only added to the thrill. My brother and I stripped to our swimsuits and waded in. It was cold, but bearable. We played the same games we had since we were kids: shark, races, breath-holding contests. Laughter echoed across the pool deck and disappeared into the trees. But after a while, the air felt heavier. That's when I saw him. A man, standing still beneath the shadow of an oak tree across the clearing, arms at his sides, watching us. He wasn't hiding. He didn't flinch when I looked straight at him. He was simply present. I gave my brother a subtle nod in his direction. He followed my gaze and whispered, "Jesus, who the hell is that?" Before I could answer, the man stepped forward, crossed the clearing, and sat down in one of the lounge chairs beside the pool. "Beautiful night for a swim." "Huh," he said, voice calm, slow, unnervingly casual. We gave him the kind of awkward, polite laughs you offer a stranger when you're young and unsure. But inside, I was tightening up like a wire. Then he stood up again. Not toward the parking lot, not toward the inn. Toward us. He stopped right at the pool's edge and just stared. No smile now. No words. Just watching. I clear my throat. "Hey, do you work here?" He didn't answer. I whispered to my brother, "We're getting out." Now. We began swimming toward the ladder, trying to act like it was all normal. No big deal. But the man moved too, quickly, toward the same ladder. So he stopped, floated in place, pretended to splash playfully. We tried again, this time drifting toward the opposite end, where shallow steps curved out of the water. He moved again. No rush, no panic, just silent, purposeful intercepting. We were trapped, surrounded by a concrete deck, this stranger on both our exits, and behind him, nothing but woods. Then we heard our dad. He appeared from around the inn's corner, calling our names. I've never felt such relief. We both screamed, panicked, full-throated. "Help!" My dad quickened his pace, spotting the man. "What the hell is going on?" We shouted that the man had been following us, watching us, blocking us from leaving. Our dad, a big man with a temper, stormed over. He got up in the stranger's face, demanded answers, shoved him back. The man didn't respond, didn't defend himself. He just turned and walked away slowly, disappearing behind a hedge toward the road. My dad stayed out there for a while, pacing, watching, making sure he was gone. We left early the next morning. No breakfast, no packing ritual, just silence. We never told the rest of our extended family. I still don't know who he was, or what would have happened if our dad hadn't shown up. But every now and then, when I close my eyes in a pool, I feel like someone's standing just out of sight and watching. My name is Daniel. When I was 7, my world was mostly cartoons, crayons and swimming pools. We lived in a sleepy neighborhood in New Jersey where nothing unusual ever seemed to happen until it did. Our next door neighbor, Mr. Beck, had been around for as long as I could remember. He was quiet, lived alone, and kept to himself. But one sticky summer day, while my mom was out and it was just me and my dad, Mr. Beck came over and asked if he could take me swimming in his pool. He smiled when he said it. Nothing in his tone felt strange. My dad looked uncertain, but eventually agreed, telling me to stick to the shallow end. I remember how warm the pool was. Mr. Beck swam slow laps while I hopped around near the steps. He kept looking over at me and asking friendly questions about school, cartoons, my favorite food. He seemed interested, kind. Then he asked if I knew how to swim. I shook my head. He glided toward me, gently lifting my legs and arms, trying to teach me how to float. It felt awkward, but innocent. At least, that's what my 7-year-old mind believed. "I'll invite you again sometime," he said as I dried off. "You're a fast learner." That night, I lay in bed exhausted. But just as I was drifting off, I heard the soft slap of water. I got up and cracked my window open. Mr. Beck was in his pool, chest deep, staring up at my room. He saw me. He waved. "Come on over, kiddo," he whispered. "Let's practice again." I was excited. It felt like a secret, like I was being let in on something grown up and cool. I threw on my trunks, tiptoed out the front door, and crept into his backyard under moonlight. It felt thrilling. Back in the water, he was even more hands-on, adjusting my arms, brushing hair from my eyes, encouraging me. At the time, it didn't feel wrong, just weirdly intimate. The kind of attention I didn't understand yet. Then everything changed. My dad's voice thundered from above, calling my name like a warning shot. Seconds later, he was in the backyard, red-faced and furious. Mr. Beck tried to explain, but my dad didn't let him speak. He grabbed my arm and dragged me home, shouting that if Mr. Beck ever came near me again, there would be consequences. I was grounded, but I didn't understand why. I told my parents that Mr. Beck hadn't done anything. They didn't argue. They just said I wasn't to talk to him again. Ever. We started house hunting a week later. But Mr. Beck didn't disappear. 3 nights later, I sat up in bed. Something had stirred me. I walked to the window, expecting quiet. There he was, standing in the shallow end of his pool, water around his waist, looking up at my room. His mouth moved in a whisper I couldn't hear. Then he lifted one finger to his lips and slowly smiled. I dropped the blinds and crawled under the covers, heart pounding so loud I thought he might hear it from next door. A few nights later, I woke to tapping on the glass. Not at the window, at the back sliding door. I snuck down the hall, peeked through the curtains. Mr. Beck was standing in our backyard. He didn't wave this time. He just whispered, "Sneak down. I brought you something. It's inside." I ran to my parents' room and shook my mom awake, tears in my eyes. She bolted upright, screamed for my dad. What happened next is a blur of yelling, footsteps, and a slammed door. My mom wrapped me in a blanket as she called the police. They arrested him for attempting to lure a child. We moved out 2 weeks later, stayed with my grandmother in the meantime. I never asked what happened to Mr. Beck. I don't want to know. But even now, years later, when I pass quiet neighborhoods or hear the soft splash of a pool, I still think of him standing waist deep in the dark, watching my window, and waiting. 5 years ago still feels like yesterday. My big sister, Claire, was about 24, fresh out of college, and crushing on the idea of meeting someone new, through Tinder this time. My family and I stayed home that night, but I remember it shifting in the living room, That uneasy feeling when Claire told us she was headed to a bar downtown to meet a guy she'd been chatting with. I watched her slip on her jacket and text him her seat by the bar. She found a seat, slid her phone in her clutch, and then he showed up. Or so she thought. A minute later, a man sat next to her with a drink in hand. He was maybe in his late 40s, disheveled, one yellowed front tooth jutting awkwardly, and Claire swore the worst breath she'd ever smelled. She smiled politely and shook her head. "Thank you, but I'm meeting someone." He didn't move. He hovered, leaning in. Claire asked him firmly to leave her alone. He finally stood and sat at a booth across the floor. Claire texted her date. "This guy's really weird." "Hurry." No reply. She texted again. "Where are you?" His answer came back, running a little late. "Grab a drink without me. Smiley face." Alarm bells rang in her head. Then the man returned, reforging the same spot at the bar. "Where's your friend?" he slurred, upset that she was still alone. Claire's voice trembled as she replied once, or twice, and then asked him sharply to leave her alone for good. She sent her last text. "Sorry, I'm leaving." Just then, his phone buzzed on the bar. Claire swallowed hard, buried her phone, and excused herself. She slipped into the restroom, called another sister, Maria, whispering panicked, "I'm leaving." With Maria's support and a shared look, she scooted out the side door and headed straight to her car. I didn't hear from her for 30 minutes, and then I heard metal grind in the driveway. Claire parked. As she made her way to the front door, a car rolled slowly past. One house down from ours, headlights dimming, staring. When she got inside, Maria and I rushed to her. We peeked out the window and saw nothing. The car had vanished, but the look on Claire's face said it all. From there, it unfolded like a slasher scene. A moment later, both of them shrieked. I dropped my controller and sprinted upstairs. Claire stood in her bedroom, pointing to her phone screen. A text from that guy's number. "Hey, sorry, missed your message. Just got to the bar." And another. "I'm coming over to your house. Which window is yours?" My blood went cold. Then I saw it. The window slid up. A hand edged through the roller blind. All three of us screamed, diving in her room. By then, the guy had staggered back from the window, probably hearing our cries, and fled into the night. Dad ran outside, but he was already gone. Car vanished. The police arrived minutes later. Dad gave them the phone number and texts. They promised to trace it, but warned it might be an app-generated burner, impossible to track. A few days later, the police called. It was fake, untraceable. Months passed in silence. The shadows moved in my room. The hush in the neighborhood grew too loud. We installed locks, alarms, and never felt safe in that house again. Claire, Maria, and I still talk about it sometimes. How one man's obsession nearly shattered our sanctuary. And every time the phone buzzes after dark, I still jump. Because some people don't match their face. They match their hate. I had just moved to a quiet coastal town. One of those places where the air always smells like seawater and everyone greets you like they already know your dog's name. I didn't know anyone yet, so I turned to dating apps to meet someone. That's how I matched with Tessa. She was older than me, 30 to my 23. Her photos gave off that artsy, laid-back vibe. Vintage bookstores, soft smiles, and sunsets by piers. She seemed sweet, confident. Our messages had rhythm. So I invited her out for dinner at a tucked-away seafood place near the bay. I waited in my car, watching the lot slowly empty as the sun dipped behind the hills. Tessa messaged she was having trouble finding the spot and asked if I could share my location. I hesitated, but figured it would help. Minutes later, An old beater of a Honda wheezed into the lot. The driver's door creaked open, and I knew it was her, though not exactly how I pictured. Tessa looked different, not dramatically, but older, paler, eyes hollow like they hadn't seen sleep in days. I went in for a hug. She leaned back quickly. "I'm not really a hugger," she mumbled, brushing past me toward the entrance. Inside, things only got weirder. She was twitchy, nervous. Her voice jumped an octave when she spoke to the waitress, and she refused to order anything but water. She stared at me like I was a test she was trying to cheat on. I tried small talk, tried getting her to laugh. It all landed flat. When the check came, she didn't reach for it, didn't even thank me. Back in the lot, I said, "It was nice to meet you." She didn't respond, just turned and walked her car. I drove home, pulled into my little apartment, bottom floor of a quiet duplex, and hung up my coat. That's when the doorbell rang. I peeked through the window. It was her, Tessa. My heart dropped into my gut. I hadn't stopped sharing my location. I didn't answer. I slipped into the kitchen, lights off, and crouched low, watching the door. A text buzzed in. "I know you're home." I replied, "What do you want? Why are you here?" No response. Just another message. "I see you. At the table. Let me in." That sentence knocked the breath out of me. I turned to look around the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. Two eyes peering through the barely open shade in the back window. Watching. I bolted from my room, shut off the lights, and locked the door. I dialed 911, whispering into the phone. Then the glass shattered. Not just a crack, full-on crash. I could hear her footsteps, slow, deliberate. Her voice rose. "Let me in. You're all the same." I locked myself in the bathroom with a hammer in hand, the operator still in my ear. More pounding, more shouting, then sirens. When I finally opened the door, she was cuffed, surrounded by 4 officers. One held a flashlight, another a notepad. Her eyes never left mine as they led her out. Silent, smiling. I later learned her real name was Marissa Ortega, not Tessa. She'd used several aliases on dating apps. This wasn't the first time she'd followed someone home. She'd been in and out of mental health care, but the system kept missing her. I replaced the window and installed a full security system. I changed my number, scrubbed my name from everything I could. But sometimes at night, I still think about those eyes watching me through the slit in the blinds. And I wonder if they're still out there, waiting for another shared location. I hadn't been on a date in nearly 4 years. When my last relationship ended, I dropped off the grid socially. But eventually, the loneliness pulled me back online. That's how I met Grace. She messaged first. Polite, sharp, warm. We chatted for a few days, and I suggested something low-key. Dinner at my place. Homemade food. Wine. Something real. She liked the idea. So I cleaned up my small house, lit a few candles, and cooked up my go-to, penne with vodka sauce and garlic bread. I even picked a nice wine. At exactly 6:30, she knocked. Grace had long, ash blonde hair and a black coat that trailed behind her like it didn't belong to the same decade. She was pretty, though colder in person. Quiet. Her voice never matched her texts. Too flat, too slow. She sat stiffly at the end of the kitchen table while I finished plating. I kept trying to find topics she might enjoy, but the conversation was like dragging a branch through gravel. She answered with pauses too long to feel polite. Her eyes flicked around the kitchen like she was memorizing every detail. Then she said, "This would be better with a candle." I blinked. Sure. I stepped into the hallway closet for one. While I came back with a candle and a lighter, Grace was sitting just as I'd left her. Only her chair had screeched ever so slightly away from the table. like she just slid back into place. "You okay?" I asked. She smiled. "Just rinse my hands." But I hadn't heard the sink. I lit the candle. We toasted. I noticed something strange in my wine glass, like dust settling beneath the surface. I held it up. It swirled faintly, vanishing in the liquid. Grace watched me closely. I didn't drink it. Instead, I made conversation, nodded along, pretended. The whole time I could feel something crawling under the surface of the evening. After dinner, she excused herself to the bathroom. I checked the glass. No smell, but something had been in there. When she came back, she was dressed again in her coat, saying her dog was sick and she had to go. I walked her to the front door and watched her leave. I locked it the second it closed. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was looping. What had been in the glass? Why she'd moved so quietly? Why she'd wanted me to light the candle just then? I stayed awake reading and watching old TV until I heard it. A soft crash from the kitchen, like a cup falling. I froze. No windows were open. No wind. Then my bedroom door creaked open. I laid still, heart hammering, eyes half open. A shadow moved in the doorway, paused, then retreated. I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then I got up. I crept to the kitchen. A streetlight lit part of the room, and in that dim silver glow, I saw her. Grace, standing still in the far corner. No crouch, no movement, just staring. "Grace," I whispered. She didn't speak. She stood next to the knife block. I said, "If you leave now, I won't call the cops." Still, she said nothing. She placed the knife. Yes, she had one, in her hand back on the counter. Then she turned, glided to the back door, and stepped out into the night. I locked the door immediately, then called 911. The police came, took the knife for prints. Later, they found her at her listed address. Her real name was Danielle Rowe. She had a sealed record. This wasn't her first time targeting someone this way. They told me the back door had been unlocked, most likely when she'd gone to the bathroom. She hadn't just wanted a dinner date. She'd planned to come back. I hadn't been on a date in nearly 4 years. When my last relationship ended, I dropped off the grid socially. But eventually, the loneliness pulled me back online. That's how I met Grace. She messaged first. Polite, sharp, warm. We chatted for a few days, and I suggested something low-key. Dinner at my place. Homemade food, wine, something real. She liked the idea. So I cleaned up my small house, lit a few candles, and cooked up my go-to, penne with vodka sauce and garlic bread. I even picked a nice wine. At exactly 6:30, she knocked. Grace had long, ash blonde hair and a black coat that trailed behind her like it didn't belong to the same decade. She was pretty, though colder in person. Quiet. Her voice never matched her texts. Too flat, too slow. She sat stiffly at the end of the kitchen table while I finished plating. I kept trying to find topics she might enjoy, but the conversation was like dragging a branch through gravel. She answered with pauses too long to feel polite. Her eyes flicked around the kitchen like she was memorizing every detail. Then she said, "This would be better with a candle." I blinked. Sure. I stepped into the hallway closet for one. While I came back with a candle and a lighter, Grace was sitting just as I'd left her. Only her chair had screeched ever so slightly away from the table, like she just slid back into place. "You okay?" I asked. She smiled. "Just rinse my hands." But I hadn't heard the sink. I lit the candle. We toasted. I noticed something strange in my wine glass, like dust settling beneath the surface. I held it up. It swirled faintly, vanishing in the liquid. Grace watched me closely. I didn't drink it. Instead, I made conversation, nodded along, pretended. The whole time I could feel something crawling under the surface of the evening. After dinner, she excused herself to the bathroom. I checked the glass. No smell, but something had been in there. When she came back, she was dressed again in her coat, saying her dog was sick and she had to go. I walked her to the front door and watched her leave. I locked it the second it closed. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was looping. What had been in the glass? Why she'd moved so quietly? Why she wanted me to light the candle just then? I stayed awake reading and watching old TV until I heard it. A soft crash from the kitchen, like a cup falling. I froze. No windows were open. No wind. Then my bedroom door creaked open. I laid still, heart hammering, eyes half open. A shadow moved in the doorway, paused, then retreated. I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then I got up. I crept to the kitchen. A streetlight lit part of the room, and in that dim silver glow, I saw her. Grace, standing still in the far corner. No crouch, no movement, just staring. Grace, I whispered. She didn't speak. She stood next to the knife block. I said, "If you leave now, I won't call the cops." Still, she said nothing. She placed the knife. Yes, she had one, in her hand back on the counter. Then she turned, glided to the back door, and stepped out into the night. I locked the door immediately, then called 911. The police came, took the knife for prints. Later, they found her at her listed address. Her real name was Danielle Rowe. She had a sealed record. This wasn't her first time targeting someone this way. They told me the back door had been unlocked, most likely when she'd gone to the bathroom. She hadn't just wanted a dinner date. She'd planned to come back. It was a Friday night in early October when the noises started. I remember it clearly because the wind outside our house in Penrose Hollow had that biting chill, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes the windows moan in their frames. I was 19 then, still living at home on my father's small, worn-out farm on the edge of nowhere. The sound came first as soft thumps, uneven, irregular, then cracks like twigs snapping underfoot. I thought maybe it was the wind or the old barn shifting in the cold. But it kept happening. Louder. Closer. I was brushing my teeth when my dad called out from the living room. "Gareth," he said, just loud enough to draw me in. "You hear that?" I joined him by the front window. He was already holding a flashlight in one hand, and in the other, he gripped his old Remington shotgun. "Something's in the fields," he muttered. I leaned close to the window. Beyond the porch lights, the cornfields stretched into shadows. There was no movement, just rows of tall, dead stalks swaying in the wind. But I knew better. I'd grown up in those fields. I knew the difference between wind and footsteps. "Could be deer," I offered weakly. Dad shook his head. "Too heavy." We stepped out onto the porch, boots crunching against the gravel. He clicked on the outer floodlights, casting harsh beams over the perimeter. That's when we saw movement, barely. A flicker of legs darting through the corn. "Hey," my father shouted. "This is private land." No response. He pumped the shotgun, a sharp metallic sound that echoed into the night. Then he ran, straight toward the field. "Dad," I called, heart racing, but I followed. The corn parted as we stormed in. Stalks slapped against my arms and face. The further we pushed, the darker it got. The moon gave little help, filtered through clouds and leaves. I struggled to keep up, panting hard, until Dad raised his arms suddenly. I stopped short behind him. "What is it?" I whispered. He didn't answer. I stepped beside him and looked ahead. There was a man, maybe 10 feet away. His face, lit faintly by a sliver of moonlight, peeked through the gaps in the stalks. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. My breath caught. Then we heard another step, a single crunch behind us. We turned. Another face. Then more. They were all around us. 7, maybe more. Men, all mostly obscured by the corn, but each close enough for us to see their pale, unmoving faces. They didn't speak. They didn't approach. They just watched. "Back up," Dad whispered. We stepped slowly, keeping the shotgun visible, though it suddenly felt useless. My mind raced. Were they thieves? Some twisted cult? Meth heads hiding in the woods? Every step backward, they stepped too. The faces vanished, then reappeared between different stalks, like shadows, shifting in a kaleidoscope of nightmares. When we finally reached the clearing near the property edge, Dad gripped my arm. "Run!" We sprinted across the grass, his boots pounding harder than I'd ever heard. When we reached the porch, he shoved me through the front door and slammed it shut behind us. He didn't say a word, just stood watch at the window with his shotgun, waiting for any sign of movement. I called the Penrose Sheriff's Department. It took nearly 20 minutes for a cruiser to show up. 2 deputies, young and skeptical, asked vague questions and took half-hearted notes. They didn't go into the field, didn't even shine a light. "No sign of anyone now," one said. "Could have been kids messing around." Dad didn't respond, just watched them until they left. That night, we didn't sleep. I sat in my old room with a bat beside the bed, listening for footsteps. None came. The next day, there were no broken stalks, no trash, no boot prints, nothing to suggest anyone had been there at all. But we both knew. From that night on, Dad started locking up earlier than usual. He bought motion lights, cameras, even a new lock for the barn. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window in the early hours, shotgun in hand, like he was waiting for them to come back. They never did, but I still dream about those faces, silent, pale, unmoving, staring out from the corn like they belonged there all along. Ezra and I were 3 hours deep into our overnight drive to Northview, cutting through the belly of West Virginia to meet friends at a weekend cabin getaway. The plan was simple: drive late, dodge traffic, crash at the cabin by sunrise. But a bad plan gets worse when you factor in Ezra's stomach. We just passed mile marker 132 when he groaned and doubled over. "Pull off." Now he hissed. "You gonna puke?" "No," he grunted, eyes watering. Worse. There wasn't an exit for miles, but eventually we found a narrow ramp that led us into a dead town with no name on the sign. It looked like a place that had been dying since the 80s and finally gave up last year. Empty storefronts. No lights. Not even a gas station. Just boarded windows and crooked power poles. We drove for another mile before spotting a faint glow. A faded sign for Hollow's Edge Donuts, a 24-hour coffee outlet tucked in the back of a crumbling strip mall. It didn't look open, but the neon flickered weakly behind a barred window. Ezra spotted the side door. "There! I'll be 5 minutes." He leapt out and jogged around the building, vanishing into the shadows without a backward glance. I pulled around back into a secluded, cracked asphalt lot hidden by overgrown trees and the building itself. Not a single other car. No street lights. Just the glow of my dashboard and a whole lot of silence. I sat there, watching the rear view, nerves unsettled. Ezra had the keys, and I didn't want to kill the battery running the radio or AC. It was stuffy in the car, the windows fogging just a little from my breath. I opened the door, stepped out for a second of air, and that's when I noticed him. far across the lot. Near the edge where the cracked pavement gave way to brush, someone stood, not moving, just watching. He was tall, or maybe it just seemed that way in the dark. He stood under a failing security light that flickered and died every few seconds. I couldn't see his face, only the silhouette. But I knew he was facing me. I got back in the car, fast, and locked the doors with a solid click. My phone buzzed with low signal. I texted Ezra. Someone's in a lot. Get back now. Seconds passed. No reply. Then the man moved. Not quickly, not even steadily. Just one step, then another, like he was testing the ground. Or savoring it. I stared, willing my phone to buzz. Willed the car to start even though Ezra had the keys. Finally, a ping. Ezra, wait for real. Me, yes. Ezra, all right, be right out. I stared at the screen in disbelief. He thought I was messing around. I typed, "This is serious, dude." By then, the man was halfway across the lot. Still slow. Still calm. Like he knew there was no rush. I debated running. The doors were locked, but glass doesn't care about locks. I gripped the handle, about to bolt, and then Ezra appeared, jogging around the corner of the building. He saw the man instantly. His smile dropped. He sprinted, fumbled the keys, got the door open, and slammed it shut behind him. "Go!" I screamed. He turned the key. The engine coughed. Caught. Tires screeched. The man had only been yards away when we pulled out of the lot. We didn't stop until we were 5 miles down the road. Parked at a gas station lit like a stadium. We sat in the car, breathing hard, hands trembling. What the hell was that? I asked. Ezra shook his head, still pale. He didn't blink. Didn't move like a normal person. Like he'd been waiting. For what? He didn't answer. Neither of us laughed. Not that night. Eventually, we told the others the story like it was a joke. A funny road trip scare. We even laughed a little. But I still think about that man in the lot. How he stood in silence. How he moved, slow and sure. Like he was used to being feared. And maybe that town never died. Maybe it was just waiting for cars like ours to pull in, for someone to step outside. For the doors to stay unlocked just a little longer.